Hello, I'm Dr. Jonathan A. Thompson, the director for the Ellen G. White Research Center at Oakwood University. We are pleased to present to you a celebration of the 100th anniversary of Ellen White's enduring legacy of social justice. For some, this will be an opportunity for us to introduce you to the Ellen White you never knew. 152 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, African American communities are still being bombarded by a plethora of incidents of social injustice. And it begs the question, are Seventh-day Adventists called to be silent and suffer in silence? Or do Seventh-day Adventists have something to contribute that is compelling and relevant to the subject of social justice? We have assembled 14 Adventist scholars who are looking at the writings of Ellen White through the lens of a very hot contemporary issue. We believe that this will be something that will help guide young and old as we go through these challenging times in these last days. We trust that you will be blessed, uplifted, and benefited from it as you watch and listen to this symposium.
For classics.
1896, where it all began. You know, Oakwood started off as a small little school. You know, nobody never knew about it. But this great person, great woman, this prophet, Ellen G. White, she saw best for us all. And I'm actually happy for that. Colored people, we was written off to the world. Nobody gave 4 cents about it. She also made the school be evangelists to the people, friends of the people, black people in the Christianity Seventh-day Adventist movement. Her son, you know, teaching the black people everything. Oakwood University, which used to be called Oakwood College. I think we should actually be happy, grateful that she made this for us. Because if it wasn't for her, there will be no us. 2008 Oakwood University. Look at it now, 2015. Great changes, great movement. Welcome to Oakwood, people.
I too fiddled with the title of my paper, like my other colleagues that altered. Dr. Thompson gave me the assignment to do Ellen White and immigration reform. I came up with the title Donald Trump, Ellen White, and quote unquote illegal immigration. And I want to thank him. I also want to thank you, you as the community of Oakwood, which has always treated me well. My last 15 years of work were the most satisfying because I spent them here. I was going to go back to California, but I liked it here so much that I stayed in this part of the world. A few years ago, 2 Oakwood students, my wife and I, had the fortune to go on an archaeological dig in the Middle East. On the first Sabbath of our stay, we went looking for a Seventh-day Adventist church in Amman, Jordan. When we walked into the worship service, a group of 3 young ladies were providing special music. Jolted, I captured the first few minutes of the experience with surprise and astonishment. I expected to see a church full of Jordanians speaking Arabic. But the 3 young ladies were singing in English, and they were all Filipinos. I noticed that at least half of the congregation was Filipino. Filipinos in the Middle East. I have since realized that large portions of Adventists are migrants. If you go to London looking for an Adventist church on Sabbath, you'll find churches full of Jamaicans and Ghanaians. If you go to Paris looking for an Adventist church, you'll find churches full of Haitians. Go to Germany and you'll find churches full of Nigerians. Go to Australia and you'll find churches full of Chileans. Since my visit to Amman, I have come to realize that the Adventist church is an immigrant church. It doesn't matter what part of the globe, Adventists attract persons that have been pushed or pulled from their homeland, migrants. I have also come to realize that this isn't new. The Adventist church has been an immigrant church since before its founding. In the 1850s, if you went to one of the first Adventist churches in the world, located in Rochester, New York, you would have found a church full of Irish and Scottish immigrants. In 1863, the year the Adventist Church was founded, the Advent Review and Sabbath Herald published a letter from Poughkeepsie, Wisconsin. And I read part of it. I am a native of Denmark, and as I endeavor to spread the truth among my countrymen, I often feel the want for tracts in the language to sell or to distribute to them. The Norwegians use the same language, and the Swedes can also read it. I sincerely hope that the Lord will open a way to have such tracts printed and scattered. In 1860 and in 1870, the work of the Scandinavians grew so quickly that by 1872, the Review and Herald published the Adventidende, the Advent Herald. In 1874, a Swedish journal by the title of Sanningens Herald appeared and was spread throughout the Midwest. When Union College was founded in 1891, Norwegian, Dutch, Swedish, and German students sat in classrooms listening to lectures in their language. In 1903, a publishing house was established at Union College, producing books and magazines in the language of immigrants. By the end of the 19th century, the immigrants had become so powerful that they elected an immigrant president, O.A. Olson. And they had founded German Theological Seminary in Clinton, Missouri, Broadview Theological Seminary on the outskirts of Chicago, and Hutchinson Theological Seminary in Minnesota, especially designed for German, Russian immigrants. Since the founding of the church during the Civil War in 1863, Seventh-day Adventists have always had immigrants in the churches. Although white Adventist historians have by and large overlooked this or pretended that it didn't happen, immigrants have always been with us. Today, wherever you go in the world, in an Adventist church, a community, colleges and universities, immigrants are populating most of these institutions. Well, you think of Oakwood. What would happen to Oakwood if we suddenly made all of the children of immigrants disappear and all of their immigrants' professors disappear? Would there be an Oakwood? Why is the Adventist church a magnet for immigrants? Or why are immigrants attracted to the Adventist church? I think this is a good time to be asking this question. The issue of immigration has ignited the race for the presidency and has catapulted Donald Trump, along with all those that hold his view, including a noted Seventh-day Adventist surgeon, Ben Carson. How do we deal with these undocumented workers that are living in the nation and dominate the issues being discussed today? Building a wall, changing the Constitution to stop the birthing of, quote, anchor babies, putting an end to sanctuary cities, and other related issues have taken center stage in the heated and frantic disputes that we listen to every day on the news media. The issue has unleashed unbridled bigotry, which seeps into all corners of the dialogue. What positions should Adventists approve? Or should Adventists have a position? At the heart of the matter, I suggest, dwells Ellen G. White. Her influence, her writings, her personality, and the ideas she infused into Adventist culture play a dominant role in attracting immigrants to Adventism. I suggest there are three elements that make this irresistible for immigrants, or that make Adventists irresistible. First is the Great Divergence, which consumed the world into which Ellen White was born. Second is the shepherd-like leading which she crafted and used to lead. And third are her teachings. Put together, these three elements become a powerful inducement that draw immigrants to Adventism. Let me go through each one of these. First, the Great Divergence. Ellen White was born during the Great Divergence. By the Great Divergence, I am referring to years beginning in the early part of the 19th century, when the world rushed into a series of remarkable transformations. For most of human history, economic development progressed at snail pace. Most people on the planet reflected similar standards of living. Whether they lived in Europe, Africa, the Americas, or Asia, the gap between the rich and the poor was negligible. Then, during Ellen White's life, normal collapsed. Economic growth with the speed never seen before wolfed down the planet. The world rushed into enormous productivity, which led to manufacturing and industrialization at breakneck speed. For a few, this created unimaginable wealth, but for the many, staggering impoverishment. Income inequality began an unstoppable sprint, so that 100 years after she died, it continues to be a top-level issue in the world. Some parts of the world became powerful empires with plump middle classes, never seen before in our history. Other parts of the world became dependent colonies with horrendous poverty. In the midst of the Great Divergence, Ellen White was born, grew up, and matured. During her lifetime, she came face to face with this state of affairs. She saw the impact and the collisions created by the Great Divergence. She saw factories in New England come up like mushrooms around the rivers. Workers, men, women, and children who worked 12 to 14 hours a day in human, noisy factory floors became her friends. She observed the wealthy in their carriages and met the working class in their homes. This world shaped her thinking, helped her develop and mature her ideas. It provided the fuel for her books and her articles. It shaped her leadership skills. Without understanding this world, it's impossible to understand Ellen White. One of the many transformations that occurred by this Great Divergence, which contributed to the transformation and the economic, social scaffolding of the world, was the thrusting of millions of people from one part of the world to another part of the world. In the 1820s, immigration to the United States totaled 8,000 people. The next decade, 1830s, it tripled to 23,000 people. Then between 1830 and 1840, it boomed to 599,000 people. Between 1841 and 1850, when Sabbath-keeping Adventists began having private meetings in home, it jumped to 1.7 million people coming to the United States in 10 years. Keep in mind that this occurs when the United States has only 24 million people in total. During these years, when Ellen White began her ministry, 781,000 Irishmen arrived in the United States. 435,000 Germans arrived. 77,000 French immigrants arrived in the United States. When she played her most important role as a leader of the Adventist Church from 1850 to 1915, the United States entered into one of the most massive waves of immigration in its history. About 5 million Germans migrated to the United States. And after 1880, when large steam-powered ocean-going vessels replaced sailing ships, nearly 25 million European immigrants arrived in the industrial cities of the North. In the tenements of the industrial cities of the North, where they settled, Adventists planted city missions, clinics, dispensaries, and witnessed the birth of most of their churches. During these years, Ellen White consistently insisted that the cities must be worked. Every wave of migrants that arrived in the United States transformed the Adventist church. The Northern European Protestants who came before the Civil War left their stamp on Adventism. The Eastern and Southern European immigrants, mostly Catholics and Jews that came after the Civil War, did the same. In the 20th century, Mexicans crossing the border and African Americans leaving the South for the industrial cities of the North during the Great Migration again impacted Adventism. And in the second half of the 20th century, when migrants came from the Caribbean and Central America, the church was changed once again. And I can think of no more powerful impact on Adventism by migrants than the birth of black conferences, which were founded during the Great Migration from 1810 to 1870, when 6 million African Americans left the cotton fields of the South and migrated to the industrial cities of the South and the North, giving birth to black conferences. The impact of the Great Divergence, which transformed the world and continues to do so today, played a central role in the thinking of Ellen White. Second, leading like a shepherd. Ellen White led like a shepherd, and that kind of leading attracts immigrants. In this context, it is important to understand that she too was a migrant. When she was a child, her family was pushed off the farm and forced to go and live in the poorest section of a port city in Maine. There, her family suffered the repercussions of the Great Divergence as machines slowly destroyed the shops and the culture of artisans. Most of the products in Portland before the Great Divergence were made by hand by craftspeople, like her father, a hat maker, and her brothers and sisters, including Ellen. The whole family crafted hats in a shop in their home. All the work was done by hand. Then came the machines and the factories, and all of those shops were decimated. In the home of an artisan, she experienced firsthand the devastation of the Great Divergence. Furthermore, for the first 10 years of married life, Ellen and her family lived migrating from town to town in New England and New York. Although she would have loved to have a home to raise her first 2 boys, poverty forced her to keep migrating and leave the boys in somebody's hands. The first house that she rented with her husband in Rochester, New York, was for a commune of about 22 people. In that house, Ellen witnessed the death of several family members taken by cholera. During her migrating years, Ellen lived in constant fear, like most migrants, in her case fearing the death of her husband and her 3 boys to a mysterious disease. Within this context, Ellen learned to be a wife and a mother. She learned the patience that only a mother can master. She learned to support her husband during his frequent bouts of depression. Often when he was ready to throw in the towel, she learned to get him back on his feet. During the migrating years, she learned to listen, to read body language, to endure suffering, pain, and adversity. When most people give up and call it quits, she learned to stick with it with a pit bull determination. By the time she was 30, several years before the founding of the Adventist Church, she was a wise, confident, and persistent mother. These skills, which she honed in the company of her husband and 3 boys, and a growing movement, prepared her for sound judgment and become a reasonable voice as the church crawled into existence. She never led from the front of the pack, frequently sitting in the back, observing the males of the movement and their posturing. But like a shepherd, who most of the time walks along with or behind the sheep, every once in a while, when direction was important, her messages were voiced with unmistakable authority. This approach led the church through stormy terrain as it searched for an identity. And my last point is what she taught. At the center of her teachings sat a set of ideas that she honed by experience. Ideas which consistently infiltrated Adventist thinking, giving Adventist culture its distinctiveness. First came the notion that Seventh-day Adventists were not of this world. They were pilgrims. In more modern terminology, migrants, passing through. According to Ellen White, Adventists did not belong to this world, but rather they were on the narrow path that led to the kingdom of God. She wrote, "We have no home here. We are only pilgrims and strangers, passing to a better country. Place your mind on these things, and while you are doing this, Christ will be right by your side. May God help us to win the precious boon of eternal life." Immigrants can understand this status better than any other group, since they have been pushed and pulled from the homeland, and once they arrive in their new place of stay, they find out that even there they are not welcome. They do not belong where they came from, and they don't belong where they're at. This is the immigrant experience, and the words of Ellen White captured this condition with precision. Her articles and writings touched a unique chord which was heard with clarity by migrants. Second, besides being immigrants, according to Ellen White, the Adventists are also the remnant, the chosen few, the marginalized. Immigrants who already perceive themselves to be different from the larger society, often unwanted, frequently the object of discrimination and bigotry, easily identified with Ellen White's idea of the remnant. You don't need a lot of verbiage to explain the idea to an immigrant. And what makes the idea even more appealing is the fact that in spite of the lowly status it denotes, the remnant are God's chosen people. Ellen White's feeling on this issue is clearly seen when she wrote about the name she preferred for the movement. I quote, No name which we can take will be appreciated, but that which accords with our profession and expresses our faith and marks us as a peculiar people.
As a church body, when we find ourselves in arenas where there is conversation or elections that will willfully leave an African American out, we need to speak. And so this is just a platform to let that be heard.
Thank you, Dr. Sepilveda, for an excellent presentation. A couple of things. First of all, I want to just tease a little bit your distinction between migrant and immigrant. And thinking about the two terms in light of a statement you shared from Ellen White when she mentioned that we are all pilgrims. So in a sense, we are all migrants. So, of course, this will call for a little guessing here, but given the fact that Ellen White sees us all as migrants, and we have this distinction between, legal immigration and illegal immigration, and the reality that many people move from north to south, from east to west, etc. What do you think Ellen White's stance would be on the whole notion of illegal immigration? Do you think that she would see all migration as legal and justified since we're all heading to one place anyhow?
Well, let me comment on the word migration and immigration. The word immigration is loaded with certain biases where you have the feeling that someone is coming to a land that, in a sense, you own. You're the one in charge of this land, and whoever comes from somewhere else is kind of intruding in your land. That's why I'm hesitant to use it very much, because of those feelings. And the word migrant basically means moving from any place to any place, right? It doesn't connote national boundaries, okay? Now, would Ellen White approve illegal immigration?
We don't know.
Oh, true, we don't know. But my feeling is she, like Jesus, sided with the oppressed, with the poor, with the hungry, with the homeless, with people that are being abused by the larger society. So I believe that she, who? God didn't make any illegal people. They're all His children.
Okay, this will be our last question.
My question for you is, what does Ellen G. White say about individuals with disabilities, whether they're immigrants or whether they're not? What does Ellen G. White say about people with disabilities?
I'm not aware that she made any comments on it. But from her whole disposition towards life, from the fact that she was really disabled for several years.
That's right.
And that's what hurt her most, when people shunned her, who were previously friends, because her face was disfigured. Her father didn't even recognize her. And so because she was the victim of bigotry and discrimination, based on this life experience, I think she always felt this tremendous empathy for anyone that's the object of discrimination and injustice. And I think this is the reason she writes these series of articles in the Review and Herald, because she had experienced it, she understood it, she was reading constantly all this literature, and she identified with people who are oppressed.
Good afternoon, ladies. Hi, my name is Ms. Stovall. I work in the Ellen G. White Research Center with Dr. Jonathan Thompson, who's the director for the Ellen G. White Research Center. And I understand that the two of you were able to join us for the Ellen G. White Symposium. And I'd like to ask a few questions of you. First of all, your name, where are you from, your classification here at Oakwood University, and also your major.
Okay. Hi, hello. My name is Tashiana George. I am a sophomore studying nursing here at Oakwood University, and I am from New York City.
Wow, wow. Yes,
and I am Raylene also. I am a junior, a general studies major, and I'm from West Palm Beach, Florida.
Wow, yeah. Welcome the two of you. I have 4 questions I would like to ask of you. And first of all, what did you take away from any of the speakers today here at the symposium?
Well, today I was called here by my teacher, Dr. Hyman. I have her for African American Studies. And I came not knowing what to expect exactly, but I was so moved by Dr. Hyman especially. She gave me a better understanding of who Ellen G. White was, not just from a Christian aspect or evangelist and how she moved our religion, but her as a person, as a female activist of her time. I have a better appreciation and understanding for her at that. So I thank Dr. Hyman for doing that for me today. I was very impressed.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Hyman.
Thank you, Dr. Hyman.
Raylene?
Yeah, well, for me, I got a general overview from all the speakers. I have Gift of Prophecy with Dr. Thompson. And so I came here just because I knew what to expect. We're working on social justice in our class. And I feel like what I got from the speakers is each speaker talked about Ellen G. White and different aspects of social justice. And I feel like everything that was spoken about was very relevant, very real from when it was happening in her era till now, and I just feel like I got a better appreciation of that tonight.
Wow, excellent. As a student here at Oakwood University, what does social justice mean to you?
What does social justice mean to me? When I think of social justice, I think back to last year, my freshman year here at Oakwood University. The Black Lives Matter movement. I remember there was a rally of some sort on university, and I remember students being fearful of wanting to participate because they were scared of the repercussions that might follow and how it may affect or look upon the university. And I myself did not go, but other students went. And I remember the Dean Anderson, saying how proud of us that she was for taking a stand despite what may have happened. So when I think of social justice, I think of doing what feels right, being moved by a higher cause, a cause higher than you, and making a difference, taking a step forward to make a change. So that's what I think of.
Excellent.
Yeah, I can agree with what she's saying, as well as when I think of social justice, I think of more social injustice and how we're trying to actively gain social justice. One word that comes to mind is just fairness. I feel like we're striving to reach equal opportunities, equal political power, equal economic, stances. And I just feel like when I think of social justice, just a broad view of fairness and just the goal to reach that.
Wow, wow. What surprised you about Ellen G. White? Ellen G. White and her views on social justice?
I wouldn't say that I was surprised on any views that Ms. White had, because I do believe that her views were not her own. I believe that in going in depth into the person that she was and what she believed in, what she stood for, her writings, she was so engulfed by the Spirit that you could tell. You could tell she was moved by the Spirit. So her ideas were not her own. So nothing surprised me. She made the milestones that she made because the Spirit was within her and was moving her.
Wow.
I can say the same. I wasn't so much surprised, but I was just more appreciative of Ellen G. White. I just feel like as a person, she was so Christ-like, and I feel like she was more of a role model, an example. You know, of course, Christ is our, like, the goal to be Christ-like, and I just feel like she was just another person that added to that, and somebody more aspiring, somebody who just, even from her education, where she was from, to just get so, you know, just Christ moved in her, as she said, and that was the Holy Spirit's work. So I can just appreciate her more, you know.
Wow, excellent answers, ladies. Excellent. Well, this is the final question. Is social justice a topic for black and white, young and old, male and female? Do you want me to repeat the question?
No.
Okay.
Okay. I got to. I believe that social justice is a topic that anyone can relate to, no matter your age, gender, your ethnicity, where you stand economically, because in a way we've all been oppressed, and we've all gone through some type of, you know, stereotypical lash. And I feel that social justice is a topic that can be addressed by anyone.
Wow.
So it has no bias.
Wow. Excellent.
I feel the same as well. I just feel like to gain social justice, it's more power in numbers. So I feel like everybody should be educated on social justice. When we all collectively come together, young, old, a male, female, I don't think it matters, you know? We all just want, or at least should want, fairness, equality, and just in every aspect of life. So it's just, if everybody comes together and everybody's educated as well, I think, you know, everybody should be educated on social justice.
Wow, excellent. Oh, I really enjoyed this interview. I would love for you two to come back and join us this afternoon at the Oakwood University Church. And this will conclude our social justice symposium event for tonight. So I want to thank you once again. Excellent answers. Excellent.